Hi, Norm. I just want to say Earth is Mama.
It's Norman.
You can't do the tango by yourself. Oh, my God.
Compelling content on the air and online. abqtalk.com. This is KABQ AM 1350.
The problem is we are fighting back, and I appreciate your being with me. Now, I want to start. Look, today is Earth Day. We've got Earth Day today, and I've got a whole lot. See, you're going to have that in your mind as you go through the day. The Supreme Court, very active today, and that's a bad thing for us.
Give me a break.
Well, that's what I was saying, but the Supreme Court was extremely active today, and not only the Supreme Court, but other courts as well, and I've got really good news, and I got really bad news, and I've got all kinds of other news, and I'm going to be doing Senior Legal Analyst time for you in about 2 minutes here. Senior Legal Analyst time in 2 minutes, more Senior Legal Analyst time in an hour, and even more Senior Legal Analyst time in 2 hours. A federal court of appeal, one layer below the U.S. Supreme Court, did all of us a very nice thing today. The Second Circuit Court of Appeal, which is based in New York City, the Second Circuit Court of Appeal said something to the Obama administration today that you and I have been waiting, and all real Americans have been waiting for some court to say, which is, no, you can't just go around killing Americans and droning them to death with no charges, no arrests, no opportunity to be heard, and then tell us it's all secret and we have no business talking about it. The Second Circuit Court of Appeal did something very good today for real Americans, and I will have that for you 2 hours from now. 2 hours from now, we're doing a whole lot of Senior Legal Analyst time. In 1 hour, there is a case that was argued at the Supreme Court today that dealt with your TV and mine. I mean, everybody watches TV. Well, not everybody, but almost everybody. And this is a really interesting case. Now, there's no decision today. The oral argument happened today. But this is a marvelous opportunity for me to share the law with you. Because it's really, unless you've got a lawyer who is willing to just kind of walk you through it. I was about to say calmly, but there's no calm in me. Calm and me never quite hooked up. But that's because I'm from New York City. They're not calm in New York City. But unless you can get somebody like a lawyer to just kind of walk you through what is going on with this TV case, it's called Aereo, this TV case, it's easy to get really confused. I've spent a lot of time reading about this and putting my notes together to kind of just lay it out for you in a way that even if you're not an attorney, I think you will get it when we're done. So stick with me for an hour and we'll talk about the Supreme Court, which, by the way, the Supreme Court's about as confused on this issue as anybody. They seem very splintered today, and courts beneath them in the layers below the Supreme Court were very splintered as well, which is why the thing ended up in the Supreme Court in the first place. But this is a really interesting case, factually. I don't know if you've been following the Aereo case. Have you been following the Aereo case?
I have no idea.
Well, you got to stop drinking. That is part number one, and then follow the Aereo case. I will have it for you in 1 hour, and I think you'll find it very interesting. Oklahoma is now punishing the people in Oklahoma that put solar panels on their roof. I'm not kidding you. And it's not just Oklahoma. You will not be surprised to know the Koch brothers. Yes, those guys. The Koch brothers are funding groups that are attacking all of the green energy initiatives in all the states. They are going after all of the states that have green energy initiatives.
South Carolina and Oklahoma and Arizona and North Dakota and New Mexico, California and Texas and New York.
Well, you should have known that was coming. I mean, whenever I started... Anyway, all right. But anyway, no joking around. The Koch brothers are funding groups like Americans for Prosperity, one of their groups, and they are going after all of the states that have, like, these mandates. Like, you've got to get 10 or 20% of your energy from renewable sources, right, and giving, feed-in tariffs, which are ways to guarantee that people who put solar panels on their roof can sell the electricity electricity generated, which is more than they need, can sell it to the local utility at a favorable rate to make it worthwhile for people to actually have solar, right? So if you have a house and you got a bunch of sun, let's say you're in Florida, which is the Sunshine State, and you've got a house and it's generating all this electricity, if you're hooked up to the grid and if you're generating more electricity than you need, right, to run your refrigerator and your TV and stuff, you can sell that back into the grid. Your meter actually runs backwards, and you get money for that if you've got a feed-in tariff. And a feed-in tariff guarantees that the utility will pay you a good price for the electricity that you generate. And so, the Koch brothers, who are, of course, fossil fuel guys, they have an oil and chemical empire. The Koch brothers don't like this whole renewable thing. And so they are funding groups, and they are now trying to roll back all of these renewable energy mandates in all of these states. I won't play Howard Dean for you again. Once was plenty. And in like Kansas, they were unable to get it done. And that's where they live. The Koch brothers are in Kansas. And they couldn't roll it back in Kansas. They got it through one house of the state legislature, couldn't get it through the other. But in Oklahoma, they succeeded. The state legislature, both houses by lopsided majorities, and then the Republican governor signed a bill that now actively punishes people by charging them money to have solar panels on their roofs. And they're trying it. Look, the Koch brothers are not giving up. They're trying it in Arizona and all of these other states. So, on this Earth Day, where we are now consistently past 400 parts per million, I hope you know who Bill McKibben is. Bill McKibben, 350.org. 350.org is 350 parts per million of CO2, carbon dioxide in the air, means we're in trouble. We are now consistently past 400 parts per million, and that is not a good thing. All right, that gets us started today. 1-888-321-6001. Let us do Senior Legal Analyst time now. We will do Senior Legal Analyst time in 47 minutes, and we'll do it again in 2 hours. But the U.S. Supreme Court today by 6-2. Now, there are 9 members of the Supreme Court, and unless you're George W. Bush, you know that 6 and 2 is
math death.
The problem is there's no domestic support for the TPP here, and the countries that are negotiating on behalf of companies, they can't work it out either. Looks like the TPP is dead. We're coming to you next, where justice is served. 3 court cases for you. We did one about 20 minutes ago, or 15 minutes ago. We're about to do another one in a half hour, and then I've got one for you in an hour and a half. But then there is this as well. Lots of states, almost half the states have either decriminalized marijuana or have medical marijuana legalized it or have flat out legalized it. And now governments, state and local, are starting to get with the program and say, you know, this is kind of ridiculous. Let's stop this, and we've locked up far too many people, and it's costing way too much money to sit in moral judgment of people and say, you snorted some cocaine, or you especially, you're black, and you smoked some crack cocaine, 10 years for you. I mean, what kind of crazy, immature nonsense is that? We're finally waking up, and I'm telling you, it's a great day for America to see America get more mature. A huge case argued at the U.S. Supreme Court today. If you watch TV, this impacts you. Stick with me.
Happy Earth Day, Norm. It's Mark Taylor-Canfield. How are you doing?
Hey, happy Earth Day to you.
Well, I got some quick news reports and then a big announcement that you're partly responsible for. But President Obama is in Oso, Washington today to honor the victims of the mudslide. Also, today is Earth Day, and at Westlake Park, the original Occupy camp for Occupy Seattle, a group called Occupy Czech has set up tents, and they are going to be there until at least tomorrow morning, when they're going to march to the City Hall to demand shelter for the homeless population, including the working homeless. Also, we have the $15 an hour minimum wage national conference happening in Seattle on the 26th, with Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist David K. Johnston as one of the keynote speakers. Also, Glenn Ford from the National Association of Black Journalists, and David Goldstein, our local blogger with horsesass.org. So I wanted to let you know about that. There's also a big story about the ownership and governance of the Internet, which includes 2 groups, the ICANN and the IANA. And what's going on is that the United States is giving up a lot of its control of the infrastructure, and the folks that are in contention for that control at this point are actually Brazil, Germany, and the European Commission. And the UN General Assembly actually just passed a privacy resolution against surveillance and data monitoring that was spearheaded by the Brazilians and the Germans. But here's my big announcement, Norm. As of next month, I will have my own online radio program through an independent network called Indie Media Weekly and also the Liberal Justice Radio Network. So I blame you for that, for mentoring me all this time and telling me that people need to get out there and speak out and build these new networks. So we're doing it, and thanks to you for all of your support along the way.
I think that's awesome. And by all means, please post on our Facebook page and at normangoldman.com and put it out on Twitter so that we can all find you. And I think that's awesome. But Mark, let me ask you about this. You were talking about the homeless, and you mentioned the working homeless. And I'm not so sure that people actually realize that there is a large population in this country that are working but don't have enough money that they are earning with the sweat of their brow to afford a place to live.
That's true. I was down at Westlake Park earlier today interviewing some of the participants, and there's a group called SHARE and a bunch of other folks that are involved locally. There's 3 tent cities in Seattle right now, and a bunch of different groups are working together to bring this story to light. What's happening in Seattle is because of the major multi-billion-dollar development that's going on here with multinational corporations, rents are going through the roof. There is no rent control in Seattle. There's never been a successful effort that creates a cap on rents. So what's happening to folks is that their rent is doubling in a matter of months, and it's just displacing a whole population of people who have steady jobs, who have families they're trying to take care of. And now the shelters are completely overwhelmed, and the last count in the King County area was 3,000 homeless people, and a lot of them are having a hard time finding shelters. So the march tomorrow is to bring this to light. To the commission had promised to provide at least temporary shelter for 1,000 people by summer, but they seem to be way behind in this effort. And so the homeless folks themselves have organized this camp at Westlake Park, and they do have a permit from the city. They're down there right now. They have an information tent, and they're handing out food. They've got
and a lot of them have jobs. A lot of them have jobs. They're not the Paul Ryan, Mitt Romney, 47% bums, takers, moochers, and leeches thing. I mean, a lot of these people work. Mark, thank you very much. I got to move along. I appreciate the call. By all means, please let us know when we can find you online on the radio online through Twitter. The Norman Goldman Show on Twitter is at Norman Goldman, and on our Facebook page, The Norman Goldman Show on Facebook. We will do senior legal analyst time in 47 minutes, and we'll do it again in 2 hours. But the U.S. Supreme Court today by 6-2. Now, there are 9 members of the Supreme Court, and unless you're George W. Bush, you know that 6 and 2 is...
math death.
It's math death. 6 plus 2 is 8. One of the Supreme Court justices was not involved in the case I'm about to tell you about. That Supreme Court justice was Elena Kagan. She is the newest member. She recused herself. She removed herself from the recused, R-E-C-U-S-E, recused herself because she had worked on the case that was heard by the Supreme Court when she was a partisan, when she worked as the lawyer for the Obama administration, known as the Solicitor General. When she was the Solicitor General is whoever's in power in the current administration, right? George W. Bush, Lyndon Johnson, whoever it is. Every administration chooses a Solicitor General. That is the administration's permanent lawyer at the Supreme Court who speaks for the administration on case after case after case. Elena Kagan was the Solicitor General. She worked on the case. She became a justice. She said, hey, I can't judge this case. I was already a partisan on this case. She recused herself. That left 6-2. And by the way, the 6 included one of the Democrats. What was the case about? The state of Michigan. The individual state of Michigan, by 58%, a majority of people, 58%, voted in an initiative several years ago to ban affirmative action from public universities and schools.
Writing the opinion backed by a 6-2 vote, Justice Anthony Kennedy leaves the court's prior rulings on affirmative action intact. But he affirms voters can choose to end race-based preferences in college admissions. In a scathing dissent she read from the bench, Justice Sonia Sotomayor said opponents of Michigan's Proposal 2 now face a Herculean task to overturn the ban. Sotomayor says the court's majority ignores the stark reality that race still matters.
That is Stephen Portnoy of ABC News, and we thank ABC News for that. But that is it. By the way, one Democrat, Stephen Breyer, he's no liberal, whatever that is. Stephen Breyer joining with the 5 Republicans to say, sure, it's perfectly all right to overturn these bans on affirmative action, to overturn affirmative action and ban affirmative action in public universities. Now, I'm a big fan of Pete Williams at NBC News. He does a really nice job.
It could embolden other states. 7 states like Michigan have banned affirmative action in school admissions. Now the Supreme Court said that when a state does that by amending its constitution, it itself is not violating the U.S. Constitution. So other states that are considering this may now say, well, if the Supreme Court says we can do it, maybe we should.
And we thank NBC News for that. Understand this, that the judges beneath the Supreme Court had thrown out the voters' initiative in Michigan. The 58% that voted to banish, to get rid of affirmative action in public universities. The lower federal courts have said you can do that in your state, but it still has to pass constitutional muster. And you violated the United States Constitution, Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, by banishing equal access to the schools, the public schools. But the Supreme Court, by 6-2, looked at it differently.
The argument here is not about affirmative action itself, and the justices in the majority today went out of their way today to say they were not expressing a view on whether colleges can have affirmative action. The question here is, if they do, can states then ban it? That's what happened in Michigan in 2006. The Supreme Court here in 2003 upheld affirmative action in school admissions in Michigan. Then voters went to the polls. 58% supported this constitutional amendment, and so it was banned.
Well, there you go. Pete Williams of NBC News. Thank you, NBC News, for that. Now, if you want to do even more law than the 3 topics we're doing today, Beyond the Norm tonight is for you. It's you and me today, where justice is served. The Norman Goldman Show.
Hi, Norm. I just want to say, Earth is Mama.
It's Norman.
You can't do the tango by yourself. Oh, my God.
Compelling content on the air and online. ABQ.
Goldman Show.